Hi there, welcome to my studio. My name is Siobhan. On this channel, I share videos about a dynamic and expressive approach to figure drawing. I focus on gesture drawing. Gesture really is the key to being able to draw the figure naturally, and it's the key to being able to unlock your own style of drawing. I share videos about my own process and I share tips and techniques. So if you're interested in figure drawing, consider subscribing so that we can stay in touch. In today's video, I want to share 5 pitfalls to be aware of and to avoid in your figure drawing. These are extremely common errors that I see cropping up in my work all the time and in students' drawings. So I'm going to share a drawing that I made, and I want to talk about these 5 pitfalls. During the process of this drawing, I grappled with all 5 of these challenges, and I want to explain each one and show you the mistakes I made and how I worked to resolve them. First of all, I shouldn't really call these 5 points mistakes. Mistakes for me anyway aren't necessarily something I try to avoid. I very often, if not always, leave mistakes in my drawing. What I mean is that these are 5 points or 5 things that could lead you off in the wrong direction and could be counterproductive. If you want your drawing to be focused on observation and expression, and if you want it to be as pure a response as possible to your subject, then these are 5 things that I think you should be aware of and try to avoid. Let's start with the first pitfall, diving into the details at the very beginning. As you probably know, if you've watched any of my other videos on this channel, I always start out very rough and loose, and I lay down marks that are purely gestural and responsive to what I see. They don't necessarily relate to the shapes or the forms. They really are just me trying to work out the overall pose. So that's what I constantly preach and encourage you to do. The aim at the start is always to try and capture the entire pose. This is really important in order to understand what gesture drawing is. A gesture drawing is not a fast drawing, and it's not a quick sketch. It's a drawing that captures the pose as a cohesive, unified expression. So in order to do that, you have to use these big marks, these loose sort of gestural responsive marks. And right away, here anyway, I started getting way too small and detailed, as you can see. I started working into the face right away, and that's always just a bad idea. And here I get really caught up in trying to draw the arm way too early. At this stage, I haven't even worked out the full pose. I've just gone off on a tangent and got caught up on one section. If you dive into the details too soon, or if you focus on just one section at the very beginning, that can really create problems for yourself in terms of proportion and scale. It's so much easier to work out the proportions and the scale when you work loose and gesturally. So try to avoid getting into the details too soon. In my defense, though, I will say that this pose for me has a ton of expression in the arms, particularly on this model. And this is the same model as the drawing I posted last week, and I will link that above if you want to check it out. And I think that's why I wanted to ensure that I could really emphasize that power in the arms here in this one. So at least, I will say I was aware that I was kind of focusing on this detail too early. The next pitfall to avoid is don't straighten up the model. This is something I do constantly, and I see my students doing it all the time. You'll have a wonderful dynamic pose with a twist or a turn in the torso, and invariably the drawing ends up looking like the model's just standing straight up. So in this particular pose, I needed to check my angles constantly to ensure that I was avoiding this. Not only is this model sort of leaning or bending over to the right, but his torso is actually bending forwards in space, like the rib cage is actually angling towards us. What's more is his shoulder girdle is at a different angle to his pelvis, the arm is going back and one of the legs coming forwards, so there's a lot going on. And if you check the pose in the link that I left in the description, you can see that my drawing in the torso anyway is much more straightened up. So, that was something I really struggled with. Again, it's crucial to check this at the very start of your process and be aware of it. It's very difficult to correct this fundamental mistake later on, and then you have to live with a drawing that doesn't quite capture the movement that you saw in your subject. Pitfall number 3 is avoid drawing the features of the face. Not something you necessarily think is a thing to be avoided. It kind of correlates to the first point of not diving into the details. And maybe this is just a personal thing, but I find drawing the details of the face can very often ruin an otherwise really good figure drawing. The main reason is because a figure drawing, to me anyway, is fundamentally a different thing to a portrait. I'm never trying to draw a portrait in my figure drawings. What I'm trying to do is simply capture a pose. So dialing into the specifics of the face can really detract from the pose, I find. Again, maybe this is just a personal thing, I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you can relate to this. But personally, I aim to keep my figure drawings very sort of general or universal. And I find that faces tend to make them very specific. But the other important point is that, again, the features of the face are so small and complex that if you're not super assured and confident, you can end up like I am here, getting too bogged down. Thankfully, I managed to break away and move on. And the fourth pitfall is don't get too dark too early. Charcoal is awesome to work with, but it can get very dark if you let it. And having too much dark early on anyway is tricky. You can easily lose the details of what you're trying to draw, and like what's happening here with me, everything ends up in the same register, in terms of your values. Yes, you can erase back. You can certainly erase back to reveal highlights, but erasing back isn't always going to make up for lines or marks that would have described the form so much better. So try to build your marks up slowly. And the last pitfall to avoid is choosing terrible photo reference. My advice is choose your reference images wisely. When I was searching for reference images for this drawing and I came across this pose, I instantly wanted to draw it. Very powerful and dynamic, and it's not always that easy to find good reference images of the male model. But when choosing your reference, you need to be really aware of what's actually going to work and what isn't going to work for your drawing. This reference actually ended up being a nightmare because even though the model's great, there's so much detail that's lost due to the dark shadows. For example, I can't see any information at all around the neck and shoulder girdle, and that's nearly the most important aspect of this drawing. And that's not a criticism of the reference itself, it's actually more of a comment about drawing from photos in general. In real life, the human eye is always going to be able to discern visual information in the shadow areas, whereas a camera is just not going to capture that at all. And you will always end up with simply flat black areas that you don't know what's going on, and you end up having to guess. So while it seems like a good idea, nice and dramatic to have a model lit with a directional light, in a photo that can cause a lot of problems. So something to bear in mind when you are looking for reference images. So those are my 5 tips for what to avoid in your figure drawing. Let me know in the comments if you have any other pitfalls to add to this list, anything that you come across that are major challenges that you try to avoid. Thanks for watching this video and for bearing with me through this awkward and very difficult drawing. I'm glad I did it in the end because it was a great excuse to share these tips with you. So I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you got some useful information. Give the video a like if you think it's worthwhile, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already so that we can stay in touch. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.